Anna's needles clicked like subway turnstiles, same rhythm for 30 years, until a Brooklyn farmer's market yarn stall changed everything. Overheard between skeins of Peruvian alpaca, immigrant moms knit their kids' college sweaters in detention centers. Her 55-year-old hands froze mid-stitch. That night, she unraveled half a scarf, cast on bigger dreams. By dawn, flyers bloomed on bodega bulletin boards, stitch and belong, yarn supplied, fam strangers arrived, Ukrainian grandmas, Ecuadorian Anna's wool skein, once tucked inside a suitcase beside her mother's handwritten stitch patterns, now unfurled across her lap like a bridge between then and now. Farmers' markets smelled of ripe peaches and diesel, same as home, but English tangled her tongue like yarn around a careless thumb. She'd fumble phrases, face burning hotter than sidewalk gum in July, then retreat to her needles, each loop a silent almost, each row proof she could build something whole from loose threads. Her deepest fear wasn't loneliness but becoming invisible, dissolving into city's steam like a dropped stitch no one noticed missing. So she planted herself on a bench near community center, needles flashing defiance. First came curious glances, then a woman with henned fingertips mimicking her movements, then a whole circle of newcomers, Syrian grandmothers, Ecuadorian teens, a Nigerian grad student, all weaving their stories into fabric of block. Anna laughed when her trembling hands botched a purl, unraveled mistake, began again. 55 years old and still learning clumsy step of belonging. But here, among fam who spoke in dropped stitches and shared silences, she found rhythm of home, not in flawless grammar, but in stubborn click of needles, in skeins passed like secrets, in warmth of something made together. Anna's wool skein unraveled halfway through a scarf, its cobalt strands pooling around sneakers she'd bought from a sidewalk vendor near Union Square. 55 years old and still tripping over new beginnings. But this time, tangled yarn felt familiar, unlike subway maps she'd misread thrice that week. A flyer in a laundromat caught her eye, stitch and sip, Tuesdays, bring your own needles. Below, a doodle of a steaming mug with mittens. Creator arrived early, clutching mismatched knitting needles like lifelines. Inside, a dozen women hunched over projects, their laughter weaving through skeins of Peruvian alpaca and Brooklyn merino. A silver-haired woman named Marisol, knitting socks with neon stripes, nodded toward an empty chair. Sit, fam dropped stitches welcome. Farmers' market apples rolled out of Anna's tote when she reached for her knitting, earning chuckles. But as weeks passed, her fingers learned dance. She crafted lopsided dishcloths first, then hats with accidental thumbholes repurposed as designer ventilation. Marisol taught her to read patterns like city blocks, turn left yarn over, right purl. One evening, Creator unfurled a scarf patterned after Ukrainian wheat fields, its golden stitches echoing her grandmother's hands. Wool skein, once just fiber, now held weight of memory and give of resilience. Around circle, women murmured recognition, Syrian lace, Ghanaian Kent hues, Bronx bodega colors. Needles clicked in unison, stitching gaps between languages. When Creator gifted her first flawless sweater to a neighbor's newborn, baby's Haitian grandmother pressed her palm and said nothing. No words needed. Wool warmed them both. By spring, Anna led a knitting booth Queen's Night Market, teaching newcomers to cast on between falafel bites. Her stall brimmed with scarves tagged made with subway delays and hope. Tourists mistook her for a local. She grinned, tugging a loose thread on her sleeve. Not wrong anymore. Anna's wool skein unraveled halfway through her third row, mocking her shaky hands. 55 years old, stubborn as Brooklyn concrete, she refused to let a dropped stitch define her day. Farmers' markets buzzed outside her window, all kale and artisanal honey, while she wrestled with unfamiliar yarn weights like they were immigration forms. Her knitting circle met in a laundromat basement, fluorescent lights humming over mismatched chairs. Newcomers arrived clutching half-finished scarves, their stitches tight with tension. Anna recognized that grip, fingers curled around hope like subway poles during rush hour. She'd been there, fumbling through English idioms, mistaking bless your heart for kindness. Now she taught them to purl through frustration, turning dropped threads into something warm. One evening, a woman from Oaxaca held up a lopsided hat, laughing its wonky brim. Anna grinned. Knitting didn't care about accents or green cards. Rose added up, even when hands trembled. She'd learned that after burning her first borscht, after misreading a bus schedule 3 times, after realizing fam here meant friends, not blood. Her needles kept time like a heartbeat. Each stitch was a tiny rebellion against doubt, a stubborn push into belonging. Wool softened edges, but it was making, relentless, imperfect making, that wove them all into City's fabric. Anna's fingers moved with quiet defiance, transforming tangled yarn into something whole. Skeins of wool, once piled like unspoken fears in her tiny queen's apartment, now spilled from her bag onto a folding table of bustling farmer's market. Around her, voices rose in a dozen languages, but her knitting circle, stitch by stitch, had become a sanctuary where newcomers traded loneliness for laughter. A skeptic lingered near her booth, arms crossed. Some folks still scoffed idea that needles and thread could stitch together frayed lives. But Anna knew better. Every dropped stitch, every unraveled row, mirrored her own journey, fumbling through English classes, misreading subway maps, mistaking baking soda for powdered sugar. Yet here she stood, 55 and fearless, her hands proof that mistakes could turn into miracles. Then came her gutsy move. With a sly grin, she unfurled a massive tapestry across table, a vibrant map of world, each continent knit in colors of immigrant flags. A hush fell. Someone snapped a photo. By sundown, her phone buzzed like a beehive. Global Stitch had gone viral. That skeptic? Now wide-eyed, clutching a skein of wool like it held answers. This is my start, Anna thought, watching crowds swell. Grandmas from Guatemala, teens from Taiwan, even a Brooklyn hipster in artisanal clogs, all reaching for needles, eager to weave their own stories into something bigger. And just like that, her tiny goof, a dropped stitch left unfixed in tapestry, became its heartbeat. A reminder that imperfection wasn't failure, it was flair. Crowd roared. Wool, once just fiber, had spun into a lifeline. Fam, that's how you knit a revolution. Anna's knitting needles never stopped moving, not even when her hands ached or her eyes blurred from exhaustion. That wool skein, once just a tangled mess of possibility, now wove through every stitch of her new world. New York's farmers' markets became her stage, where she'd perch on a folding chair, fingers flying, as newcomers paused to admire her work. Soon, they weren't just admiring. They were sitting beside her, clumsy needles in hand, laughter unraveling language barriers like dropped stitches. Her knitting circle grew, a patchwork of accents and stories. A Ukrainian grandmother fumbled through a scarf. A Guatemalan teen wrestled with a lopsided hat. Anna guided without correcting, her odd habit of humming Soviet-era folk songs becoming their unlikely soundtrack. Skeins of yarn passed between them, each loop a silent promise, you belong here. By winter, her fam had knitted enough scarves to warm half of Queens. But it wasn't about scarves. It was about Syrian widow who finally smiled after months of silence, Nigerian engineer who found calm in pearl stitches, way Anna's own loneliness dissolved like sugar in tea. That tangled skein? Now it was a bridge. So grab your needles, make warmth where you are.